on the other side of this, obviously the chip sector fell dramatically yesterday. It seems largely because of the Trump comments in the interview about Taiwan, as opposed to the potential for new deterrent actions by the Biden administration against foreign companies that use some U.S. parts and they're selling to China.
Sophisticated.
But overall, it just tanked a lot of the semis.
Right.
I mean, AMD had a very bad day, NVIDIA, and any number of Qualcomm, and go on from there.
Right. Well, I do want to point out, and Carl, this is something that for our at-home investors. A study just came out by Arizona State University, and it looks at 100 years of returns of stocks. People are saying to me, Jim, why do you stick with this NVIDIA? Why did you name your dog NVIDIA? Okay, so in 100 years, the highest annualized compound return for any stock with at least 20 years of return was 33.38% earned by NVIDIA shareholders. Greatest performing stock. And now, this is the greatest performing stock over 100 years. So, no, I'm not going to flee it because someone's got some damn program which takes up 10 biotechs that are worth zero and blows out of the company who's no longer in the $3 trillion. It was kicked out of the $3 trillion club yesterday. I say welcome back.
Yes. B of A today writes about the period last year where everybody lightened up on NVIDIA.
How was that?
For idiosyncratic winners like Pins and AMD. They think this might be what they call it, a fake AI top.
Well, there was a huge day where NVIDIA was down 9 points versus, obviously percentage-wise, very big. And I was vilified by people at a charity event. Why are you sticking with this thing? But I always ask them when they say that, do you know what NVIDIA does? Goes higher. That's like you have to study NVIDIA to realize that it may be part of a bigger trend. Now, I don't know if it's going to go up today, but David, over a 100-year period, the best performing stock, isn't that worth something?
It's worth something, but past performance is no indication
what
of
have you done
future
for me lately
performance.
versus 100 years, David?
I'm just saying it's
skeptic.
It's
He wants
already,
Warner Brothers Discovery. It's up 37 cents. Yeah. Courtside.
Let me bring up something else, though, that has also sort of coincided with this sell-off, which is this idea that the hundreds of billions being invested by the hyperscalers, namely Meta, Amazon, Alphabet, and Microsoft, will not see a significant return on the invested capital over time. Roger McNamee brought it up last week on our air. He was citing a paper by a guy named David Kahn from Sequoia, talking about AI's $600 billion question. And then you had this report from Goldman last week as well. Microsoft, Meta, Amazon, and Alphabet spent $357 billion on CapEx and R&D over the last 4 quarters, 1 year. And then that question as to whether or not and how long it's going to take for them to see any kind of a return on that. Is that melding into these questions and perhaps also part of why we've seen this violent rotation?
I drank the Hawaiian punch. I remember I used to do that to you. I drank the Kool-Aid for Jensen because it's just look, when he says every single thing that a human can do in terms of moving, a robot can do better. What am I supposed to do? Tell Jensen he doesn't know what he's talking about? This man's the smartest person I have ever met, also very humble. And I'm not going to say, you know what? Your 100-year return means nothing to me. Your view of the reality of where things go and you beat a quarter by $4 billion means nothing to me because Roger McNamee, whom I actually really like, said, well, it may not pay off. And I would come at it and say, if you don't think it's going to pay off, you ought to go buy the stock of Apple because everybody wants to give Apple their AI. So that's the best way to combat the negativity is that all the hyperscalers want to give Apple the AI so that Apple can use it with its installed base of 1 billion people.
Right, but we may be in a period where people are questioning what kind of a return you're going to get, at least in the next 2 or 3 years, on this enormous investment being made. Well, not to mention the pressure on our electric grid and so many other things that are occurring as a result of this.
The electric grid got hit. All the electric grid stocks got killed yesterday because of this thesis that they were overspending. Look, I'm Jensen again, just quoting what he says. Look, there's going to be winners or maybe a winner. Now, I come back and keep thinking about the year 2000. Everyone always says how horrible that was. I look at Amazon.
Right. There are those. I made the same point with McNamee when we had this conversation. which is, yeah, but we came out of that, and yes, there was a lot that was overhyped, but ultimately much of it was underhyped because of the impact that it had. But it doesn't mean that it had that impact in the same time frame that was initially.
Right. I mean, look, if you take a 100-day perspective, I bet you NVIDIA loses you money because they spent a lot of money. We don't know what's going on. But if you take a longer-term perspective, it's about an industrial revolution. And I believe that. What he says, like the PC, like the iPhone. But it is true. Who won in the iPhone? How many companies? Well, Apple did. But if you've picked the winners, the return for the winning stocks during this period, I love this thing, is 5 million%. There's a bunch of stocks that are up 5 million% during a 100-year period. I want to be in those. I do not want to be in the Russell 2000 Pacific Bioscience. Oh boy, that's a good one.
But
right? Lithium.
Wouldn't you like to go through this churn if, in fact, it means less reliance on 7 or 5 or 6 names?
I love a broadening, but it has to stop. It can't be parabolic broadening. I look for the rest of the S&P 500. I'd like that to start trading up, and these stocks maybe stall out, but they've become huge share donors. People are selling NVIDIA to buy an ETF, small cap ETF. They're not actually singling out stocks. If they were singling out stocks, they would never buy the stocks. And I just think that it usually lasts 3 days. That rotation in the historical, I don't have the 100-year time frame, but since for about 40 years, we get a rotation that's vicious. They last 3 days. We're on day 4.
There. Coming into the day, everyone was pretty shaky. Then all of a sudden, Taiwan Semiconductor posted their numbers. It looked like it was going to be great. In fact, the company CEO said, CCY said, the AI is so hot that right now, everybody, all my customers want to put AI functionality into their devices. The stock opened higher, and now it's lower. I want to bring in Moo market strategist Jessica and Mary. Jessica, it's tech getting hit again, and what it's starting to feel like is that sort of proverbial snowball is becoming a boulder, and yet you're bullish as ever when it comes to tech, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if we take a big picture, Charles, the fact is that we've got that $1.3 trillion freight train of AI spending coming over the next 10 years. And I think sometimes, we can see a pullback. We can see NVIDIA, we can see CrowdStrike, some other tech and AI-related stocks are in a correction, and everyone gets spooked. But the fact of the matter is we've got to think about what these companies will look like in 5-10 years from now. But heck, the next 12 to 18 months are looking pretty bullish. We're probably going to see the most earnings growth from this sector and the most multiple expansions and upgrades. So it's just a temporary pullback because of the rotation.
Okay. Now, listen, I'm not disagreeing. Obviously, I agree with what you're saying, but juxtapose this to other great, amazing moves, right? Industrial Revolution stuff. The railways, right? They rocketed up 135% before coming down, crashing. The telecom bubble, that was amazing, up 400% before it came down. And then, of course, more recently, we had the shale revolution, exploded, it's come down. I think what people worry about those, what they all have in common is that when the party was over, when the fanfare faded, these stocks never came back. So is there a point where you start to get out as they peak? I mean, so you think the next 2 years, just hold them and don't worry about it?
Yeah, so when we value a stock, we're looking at forward cash flows, we're looking at forward revenue growth. So the estimates are on upwards of 80% for stocks in this cohort. I mean, the likes of NVIDIA, for example, NVIDIA, I don't own it anymore, unfortunately, but NVIDIA has got the most compelling forward earnings estimates of 98% revenue growth. You're not getting that from anywhere else in the megatech part of the market. Also remember as well, Charles, NVIDIA, they're at the tip of the iceberg.
Right.
They've only just gone into healthcare.
Okay.
They only just inked a deal with J&J.
Jessica, let me jump in. I got to jump in because I got less than 30 seconds, but I saw in my note that you're either spying or long Tesla, and I bring it up because they report next week. Here's the year, right? It was one of the big losers. They kicked them out of the Mag 7. They kind of fought their way back into it, but they ran into resistance here. Would you be long Tesla going into the earnings?
I am long. I am long Tesla. Lots of clients have been buying into the dip, and earnestly and honestly, investment banks are upgrading Tesla, expecting really positive things. We could see a turnaround year, particularly because the Chinese government has just added Tesla to the procurement list for the first time ever. So Tesla will now be competing with BYD in China. This is a huge deal.
All right, and by the way, this 254 is a breakout. We're only $2 away from there. Jessica, thanks a lot.
All right, let's give a quick update on NVIDIA and TSMC's earnings. As I mentioned in yesterday's video, I was watching TSMC's earnings report that was released this morning before market open. They reported net revenue of roughly $20.63 billion US dollars, and that number is in line with my estimate yesterday of net revenue around $20.67 billion. Remember that TSMC is based in Taiwan, and so their revenue is reported in new Taiwan dollars, so you have to convert that number from NT to USD, and you get roughly $20.63 billion in net revenue. EPS came in at $1.48 per share, so TSMC beat on expectations for both revenue and EPS. And now what I was most interested in, TSMC's forward-looking guidance. TSMC expects revenue in Q3 to be roughly 8.5% to 12.4% higher than revenue in Q2. And they also expect gross margins to increase slightly from 53.2% up to a minimum of 53.5%, so that is good as well. Put simply, TSMC expects solid growth and growing profit margins next quarter. Of course, NVIDIA designs chips, and then they rely on other companies, mainly TSMC, to actually manufacture those chips. I did some digging through TSMC's earnings and consensus estimates for NVIDIA's next earnings report. If NVIDIA were to experience the same quarter-over-quarter growth that TSMC experienced, then NVIDIA would likely beat the current consensus estimates for their next earnings report. But keep in mind that this is like comparing apples to oranges, and it's not a direct comparison. There's much more to the situation. That being said, after going through TSMC's earnings today, I feel more comfortable in saying that NVIDIA is likely to beat consensus estimates on their next earnings report, unless we get a lot of unexpected upward revisions between now and then. I think after TSMC earnings today, most market participants will now be focusing on NVIDIA's forward-looking guidance at their next earnings release. If guidance is much better than expected, we could continue to see multiple expansion in NVIDIA stock. But if guidance comes in softer than expected, then I would expect the market to place a much tighter multiple on NVIDIA stock moving forward. NVIDIA has announced the date of their next earnings report. It is scheduled for August 28, 2024. Now let's talk about the chart. Yesterday, I said I expected NVIDIA to trade lower in the short term, but I would not be surprised to see some technical bounces along the way. Today is a great example of both of those things happening. We made a lower low than yesterday, but of course NVIDIA was so oversold after yesterday's trading action that we got a little bit of a bounce at the time of this recording. In the short term, I'm seeing conflicting signals on NVIDIA's chart. We have yet to break above this supply zone with strong volume. This supply zone was formed yesterday, so that is short-term bearish. At the same time, we have a very large bottom wick from earlier today on the 4-hour time frame. So there are definitely still buyers present in the market at the moment. I'm seeing conflicting signals for right now. I think we will have much more clarity after a couple more trading days. Personally, if I were looking for an entry on NVIDIA, I would consider adding between the range of $98 per share and $112 per share, and the closer to 98 the better. Will we see a dip like that? I don't know. Time will tell. Right now, I think the market is still just digesting everything and trying to figure out where we go from here. We have the recent comments from former President Trump about Taiwan, news about the Biden administration implementing export controls, and TSMC's earnings report today. It will take some time for market participants to digest all of this, and so I wouldn't be surprised to see choppy price action within a tight range until market participants reach some sort of consensus. In case you missed the news yesterday, Bloomberg reported Trump was questioning whether the U.S. should even defend Taiwan and saying that Taiwan should pay the U.S. for protection. Keep in mind that about 90% of the world's most advanced chips are currently manufactured in Taiwan. Additionally, Biden is reportedly considering implementing export controls that would make it much more difficult for China to get chips. Both of these news events from Trump and Biden are short-term negative catalysts for semiconductors. For now, I'm watching carefully before making any moves, and I'm curious to see how the market digests and reacts to everything. Right now, I think a lot of market participants are considering the recent news, and they're trying to take some money off the table and de-risk a little bit given that NVIDIA has had such a monstrous rally recently, and the future of semiconductor manufacturing is a little unclear at the moment due to geopolitics. I'm curious to know your thoughts on NVIDIA in the comments below. Please leave a like on this video so more people will see it. And while you're down there, please consider subscribing. It's free, and you can always change your mind. Thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video.